Chapter 4, Developmental and Learning Theories. So, as we've talked about before, development is closely related and influences each other. So, we've talked about how language and social emotional development work together, right? You can't develop your language skills unless you can have a positive conversation with someone. Um, so, physical development and social emotional development are also linked, being able to move around, being able to be in a physical space with someone. So all the areas of development are closely related to and influence each other. Learning and development follow sequences. Like I said, most kids crawl before they walk. Certainly they sit up before they can stand up, right? Um, and they proceed at varying rates, right? We see the sequence. Sometimes kids do things faster than others. Sometimes, some kids may go from pulling up to walking just like that. And some kids, it may take forever. Some kids may go from a few words to many, many words so quickly you can't even, believe it. And some kids, they babble for a very long time before they start putting words together. So we know all of that, and we know that your early experiences have a profound isn't even a big enough word, dramatic effect on how you develop and how you learn. This is one of the reasons we talk about why high quality early childhood education is so important. What happens between 0 and 5 or 0 and 8 has a huge impact on the rest of your life, from how you develop cognitively, even physically. Children who are less healthy in those first few years of their life will have impacts of that for the rest of their lives. Okay. And think about it this way: if you don't learn to talk until you're 3, and all of your peers around you have been talking since they were, 18 months or so, if they're a year ahead of you, that's going to have an impact for a long time. So while it's always important that we bring all children, developmentally along together, we need to make sure that we are focusing on those who need special help in areas of their development, and that we're providing equitable education, childcare for everyone, right? Development proceeds toward greater complexity, self-regulation, and symbolic or representational capacities. So what that means is you start with the simple stuff first, and you take on more difficult tasks, right? So a simple thing would be putting the ball in a box, right? Later on, you might be throwing the ball into the box. You might be bouncing the ball and putting it into the box. So the simple things happen first, and they become more complex through development. And children are working more toward being able to do things on their own, being more independent, and they're also working toward being able to do things that are not concrete right in front of them. So representational or symbolic. So they're using a block not as a block in play, but they're using it as a pretend cell phone, because they've gotten to the point where they understand representation and symbols, okay, which is about 3 or 4 years old. Development and learning are influenced by multiple social and cultural contexts. They shape their motivation and approaches to learning, which means we want to make sure that children's experiences in early childhood are positive, because it's their job for the next 12 or so years to go to school. So we want it to be a place that they want to be, right? Play is how children learn, and that goes through all of childhood. Children learn best through experience and when they're doing something that's interesting to them. Development and learning advance when children are challenged. We need to set high expectations, and children will live up to them. They learn in a variety of ways, and they develop best when they have secure relationships, which is why it's important that early childhood professionals be well qualified, well trained, and be doing the most appropriate things with their children. So we've talked again about those developmental domains, and I like to make it 4: physical, social, emotional, and cognitive, and then language. I like that language one to be in there. Okay. This is just a little thing that shows how those developmental domains cover the smaller areas where children are developing, right? So this is all about the theories of how children develop. And these come out of education, they come out of biology, they come out of psychology, they come out of philosophy. So all of these theories that we're going to talk about are ones that scientists and researchers have come up with to explain why children do the things that they do. Is it maturation versus experience? If you put a child in a situation where he's not having any outside experiences, is he going to develop the same way as a child who has all kinds of outside experiences? Is development based on just your physical growing up, or is it part of a whole system of things that are happening to you? Is it nature versus nurture? Same thing. Is it just going to happen? Is development just going to happen just because you're getting older? Or are there outside influences to your development? The answer is yes to all of the above. Okay. And smooth, continuous, or stages. This one is kind of how you look at it. Like, there are stages, but children tend to move continuously from one to the next, right? So, what's a theory? A theory is an explanation for how children develop and learn. And it's a theory, so it's an idea. It's not necessarily the only explanation. It helps you understand, it provides you with guidance, it helps you evaluate a child's learning, and helps you explain to others how learning occurs. So, one of the first people to tackle personality, emotional child development was Freud with his psychoanalytic theory, which was that personality development. He talked about personality development and emotional problems, and really how those things were rooted in things that happen in childhood. And Erik Erikson is a name you're going to hear a lot. He talks about how children's behavior happens in stages, and you can anticipate what's going to happen by knowing what stage a child is in. So, psychoanalytic theory, we don't talk that much about. It's been somewhat de-emphasized. There's a lot of focus on sexual development and the impact of various sexual things. And while we think some of that is probably true, a lot of it has been overemphasized through the years. Okay. One thing that's important to understand is how relationships with people impact development and personality. Early childhood educators talk a lot about Erik Erikson and psychosocial development. So this is how people relate to each other and problems on the social level. Development is driven by quest for meaning, for who am I? And it goes throughout your whole lifespan. And you can probably predict some of this. So we'll talk about the first 4 stages we talk about in early childhood. The first is basic trust versus mistrust. So from birth to 18 months, trust develops when needs are met consistently and predictably, right? So why do you need to have this? Because you can't do anything for yourself from birth to 18 months. You need to have someone who is taking care of you. And that helps you develop. You feel like, oh, my mom is here. She's going to feed me. I'm happy. I don't have to worry. And then autonomy versus shame and doubt, 18 months to 3 years. Children are starting to learn to be self-sufficient. And if they can't be self-sufficient, they start to doubt themselves. So in those years, we need to set up opportunities for them to be successful, right? We want to them to be able to climb up to the top of that thing successfully. And we need to give them the space to try out things as well. Okay. Initiative versus guilt is ages 3 to 5. Children are seeing, oh, there are people around me, adults, and I want to be like them. This is when little girls start playing mom, or little boys start doing, you know, job things, which is a totally sexist way of looking at it. But this is when we see children taking on adult activities, right? This is when you see kids with cell phones, right? It's a block, it's a cell phone, or a calculator. They're using it as a cell phone. They want to try to be like the adults around them, and they need guidance. They need to have help in doing the things that they want to do. Stage 4 is industry versus inferiority. Ages 5 to 8. Children are active and busy, learning to be competent, or are unable to do things well. So all along, they're trying to do new things, and our job is to help them do those new things with some success, but also to show them if they do fail, it's not the end of the world, that they have the ability to be resilient and to move on from there. Okay, behaviorism is a theory from Pavlov, Watson, Skinner, Thorndike, and Bandura. And this is basically that children are a clean slate, that all the things that are happening around them are influencing their development. So we're going to talk about how this is very, like it says, focused on behavior. Why are you doing the thing that you're doing? I will put some links to some videos so that you can watch them, because they're interesting, and they describe these things in a sort of different way. So behaviorism and behavioral theories, they promote learning through rewards and punishment. This is your typical behaviorism often is used to teach children toilet training, right? Sticker charts, treats. You're rewarding good behavior. The behavior is the thing that you're focused on, right? And the behavior is the thing that you're learning. You're trying to learn how to do this by doing it and being rewarded, or, we don't like to do this, but being punished, right? This emphasizes experiences and environment, and we'll talk about conditioning a little bit. We are conditioning when we are toilet training. So learning occurs when an organism interacts with the environment. Through experience, behavior is modified or changed. So classical conditioning is the learner is conditioned to give a response when exposed to stimuli. Stimuli could be singing a song to indicate cleanup time. Children are conditioned to respond to the stimuli. This can account for development of phobias, because so if something happens to you, and it's a negative thing, then you're going to be conditioned to have, a scared response to it. When you watch, I'll show you the video of little Albert, who was a toddler that was conditioned to be scared of furry animals. And the way that they did it was they would expose him to a furry animal. And when he was exposed to it, the developmental theorist, Watson, would bang on a pipe above his head. So every time he saw a furry animal, he would hear this, terrible negative sound, and it conditioned him to be scared of furry animals. There's videotape that you can watch. We don't do that kind of research anymore. It's highly unethical. Okay, so that's classical conditioning. Operant conditioning focuses on the response rather than stimuli. So operant conditioning is what we do when we're potty training. Reinforcement makes it more likely the behavior will recur again. So when you see somebody doing something good, you reinforce it by giving them praise, giving them a sticker, giving them some sort of reward. Punishment makes it more likely the behavior will not occur again. So punishment would be physical punishment, spanking, or a timeout, right? Negative reinforcement is the hardest one to understand. Negative reinforcement is I'm screaming because I don't want to do group time. and I scream until I don't have to do group time. So that's negative reinforcement. You're reinforcing the behavior that you don't want to see. Okay. And then modeling. Modeling is observational learning. Albert Bandura talks about this a lot. Children do what they see. So when you are in a classroom with children, you want to model the behavior that you want to see. So if you're standing in the corner of the classroom yelling at kids to do stuff, what are you teaching them? You're teaching them that it's okay to stand in the corner and yell at people, right? What you want to do when you want something done in your classroom, go and do it. Show them how it needs to be done. When behavior is rewarded, it continues. When behavior is not rewarded or ignored, the behavior will stop. Positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, right? Applied behavior analysis is looking at the behavior that a child is doing and trying to figure out what is the function? What is the child trying to get out of this? So let's go back to the screamer at group time. Every time I say it's time for group time, Timmy starts to scream. And we've been taking him out of group time and he stops screaming. So we know that the screaming is because Timmy doesn't want to be in group time and he's getting his intended outcome, which is to get out of group time. So we need to think about how can we find a way to get Timmy to enjoy group time so he doesn't have to scream, so he doesn't want to be there, right? So maybe there's a toy that Timmy could hold during group time, or maybe there's a special chair that Timmy could sit in during group time that will help him feel better about being in group time. Albert Bandura is the social learning theory, and this is modeling and observation experiences. Children do what they see. And if they think it's okay for an adult to do it, they're going to think it's okay for them to do it. There are a lot of negative social learning things happening in the world right now. A lot of adults doing things that they shouldn't be doing that kids think that they can get away with. And I think we need to be really careful about that. And it's not just real world stuff either. So I'll put the video for the Bobo experiment where kids were really violent because they learned to be violent from watching violence. Cognitive theory, constructivism. This is children are active in developing their own understanding. So children learn by being exposed to things around them and figuring out how it all works together. So children are actively seeking knowledge, whether they know it or not, right? When they ask a question, there's a reason for that question. When they try to put something together in a weird way, there's a reason for that. Teachers need to understand what children know and build on that. Piaget, I'll put some videos of this too. Active learning, hands-on learning. We need to be involved doing things. Kids learn when they do, right? We all learn better when we do. Assimilation is the process of fitting new information into existing schemes. So, for example, all round red objects are assimilated into existing schemes and called balls. Okay, so a little kid sees any red round. When he sees a round red object and someone says that's a ball, he thinks all red round objects are balls. So when you hand him an apple, he thinks that's a ball, right? But then when you say, but this is an apple, then they need to change their schema, right? That's the thing that they know, the schema, to accommodate that new information. Oh, so all of these red round things are balls, but this particular one is an apple, right? And then equilibrium is when you make sense of the new information. You know, that can't be an apple, that's a ball. Well, not all things that are red and round are balls, apparently. This is when equilibrium is when you get that figured out. Okay. So we're always trying to work toward equilibrium, and we're adapting our thinking as we go. So here we go. Santiago knows how to ride a three-wheeler. That's his initial scheme. That's his initial, like, this is the thing that I know. And then Santiago rides a bicycle with training wheels for the first time. So now he's got 5 wheels, right? He uses the motor process knowledge of a three-wheeler to fit the motor process needed to ride an upright bicycle with training wheels. He already knew how to ride the three-wheeler. He's using the scheme, what he understands about bicycles, to ride the 5-wheeler. So then he's assimilating that, right? As he becomes proficient at it, he's assimilated the new wheels into riding a 5-wheeler. But then his dad takes the training wheels off. And this is called disequilibrium because he messes it all up. So he's trying to do it the same way that he did before with all of those wheels, but he's falling off. But then he starts to understand. He practices, he changes a little bit to figure out how to make the balance work. Now he's accommodated and he's reached equilibrium. Okay. So Piaget has stages of development just like Erikson did. And the first one is sensory motor from birth to 2. The thing that you need to know about sensory motor is that children understand things by tasting, licking, seeing, touching. This is all about how you're a baby, right? This is why kids are always putting things in their mouths. They can't talk about, oh, this is a prickly thing. They touch it and feel it and experience it. Okay. Cognitive development stage 2 is pre-operational stage. From 2 to 7, they're starting to understand symbols, right? They're starting to understand that writing is words and it can tell a story. They're starting to understand that everything doesn't revolve around them, right? They still think that everyone acts like they do and understands things the way they do. They're having a huge growth in language from 2 to 7. I mean, really. And they talk themselves through things. So you may not even hear it, but a lot of times kids when they have something to do, they're talking themselves through the steps. They're not able to conserve or reverse operations. So if you give them a 3-step process, they may not be able to stop or to remember this was a step in the process or to turn it around, but they can do the 3-step process at this point. And then ages 7 to 12, concrete operations. They are thinking intentionally. So now they're going, oh, I'm going to draw a picture of an ice cream cone. And so I'm going to start with this triangle at the bottom, right? Up until really about 4 and 5 years old, any drawing that they're doing is random and they're naming it after. Sometimes they're doing it intentionally, but if you ask a 3-year-old what they're drawing, they will a lot of times come up with it afterwards. Like they didn't intend to draw this, but they're just naming it. One-to-one correspondence starts in 7 to 12. So this is an important step in math, right? This thing equals this thing. And then they're starting to think logically. They're putting steps into their thinking. Well, if this is a thing that happens, then this is going to happen too, right? It's not just, well, if I do this, we'll see what happens. There's intention and logic in their thinking from 7 to 12. Lev Vygotsky is my personal favorite theorist, and he focuses on how children need the interaction of the people around them to develop, and specifically speech and language are an important part of development and learning self-regulation and social development. So Vygotsky is really important. The zone of proximal development is the area where a child is having the greatest development at that time. And then scaffolding is helping them, we talked about this earlier, helping them move, giving them a little bit of a challenge, giving them as much help as the least amount of help that they need to move on to the next level. I think Vygotsky is fascinating. Yuri Bronfenbrenner talks about ecological theory of child development, which is basically a bunch of rings, and in the middle are the people and things that have the most impact on your development, and going out, the concentric rings are things that impact your development, but not as intensely, right? So family and school are right in the middle. Howard Gardner talks about the development of multiple intelligences, and you can think about this way. Oh, I'm a music person. I learn best by singing songs. Last night, my daughter was talking about the Constitution, and she sang the Constitution because she learned it from Schoolhouse Rock. She learns by singing. When she was in second and third grade, she was having a really rough time with math, and we realized that if she sat there and she sang through the problems, she would be much more successful. So that's one way that children can learn. Some children have to move their bodies in order to get that input to make sense. Some people have to draw a picture. Some people have to talk about it, right? So there are a variety, 9 different types of intelligences, and these are some of them. Maturation theory is that most development happens just because you mature, right? You grow. Abraham Maslow's self-actualization. This is an important thing to remember. This is more and more important, I think, all the time. Abraham Maslow believed that you cannot develop as a person unless the basic needs are met, right? You need to have life essentials. You need to have food and water. You need to have safety and security. You need to have belonging and love. Before you can start learning, before you can develop yourself as a person, you need to have these needs met. The higher you go on the hierarchy, the more you're going to be self-actualized, the more you're going to be, a full person, whatever that means. But most important, a child cannot learn unless they are fed. A child can't learn unless they are living in a safe place, right? A child can't learn unless they know that someone cares about them. So it's important that we provide these things for all children. So this is the hierarchy of needs, starting at the bottom: life essentials, safety and security, safety, freedom from fear, and stability, belonging and love. These are things that you need to reach your maximum potential. These are things that you need in order to learn and to be a developing human being. And there are too many people who don't get all of these things. Okay, some key developmental topics in early childhood education: identity, ethnic and cultural diversity. We know there are a lot of different cultures. Children come from all different kinds of experiences, and we need to make sure that we are being sensitive to that. Gender, identity and role, sense of being male or female, generally happens around age 3. This is a very interesting and changing field and idea. This is something that, in my lifetime has totally changed the way we think about gender. Now we talk about how people identify as opposed to their biological gender. And we know that that's a thing. Like, some people are born and they don't feel right. And sometimes it's because they feel that they were assigned the wrong gender, right? We don't think about gender as attached to reproductive organs as much as we used to. It's more about your personal identity. And I've known kids who were 3 and 4 years old who could tell me that they weren't a boy or they weren't a girl. And so we need to be very sensitive to that too. The days of all the girls on one side of the classroom and all the boys on the other are probably not appropriate anymore, or lining up boy, girl, boy, girl. Most children are going to identify as the gender, the biological gender that they are, right? But some children aren't. And it's very confusing and it's very frustrating and very stressful. And so there are better ways to help children understand gender than just saying you're a boy, you're a girl, right? If you want to do the thing where you're having kids line up by sweater color or hair color or whatever. Attachment, emotional connection between two people, security, safe base. Kids need attachment. Kids need a place where they feel safe. And it needs to be a place or a person who doesn't judge them, who doesn't challenge them. I mean, you can challenge them as long as you're nurturing them too, but kids need a place where they can relax and feel okay. Play is super duper important. Babies are socializing through interaction. Toddlers are going from solitary play to parallel play. They're learning how to play by themselves and then learning how to play with somebody else playing next to them. And then in preschool, they learn to play with another child, right? And then they get to cooperative play where there are rules for their play that they all understand. And then socio-dramatic and dramatic play is they're trying out different roles. And Vygotsky would say that when they take on a role, it enhances their behavior. So because they can see in the world there are specific rules that go along with the behavior of a role that they're taking on. So like a doctor, for instance, kids who are taking on that role, their behavior is enhanced. So you're not going to have behavior problems when a child has a role that they're supposed to take on, because they take it very seriously and they think about, is this something that this person would do? Right? So a way for that to be helpful in a classroom is to teach students what their role is, and then they have to take on that role every day, right? And then brain function, how the brain works. We're talking and learning more and more about biologically what's happening in your brain and how that affects development. So what do we need to do to help children learn? Learning must be real. It must have a connection to a child's life. We can't teach, especially little kids, abstract concepts that don't mean anything to them because they don't have anything to relate it to. They have no way of thinking, okay, this is how this would work in my world. I would also say that adults don't have that. I think when you learn best, you're learning about the things that are actually happening that make sense to you, that have an impact on your world. It has to be rewarding. It has to be fun and interesting, and you want to challenge and nurture kids, right? Learning must build on children's lives. So we want our parents, family members to know and understand what kids are learning so that they can talk about it at home. And then it needs a good stage. It needs the physical, emotional, and mental health so that they can leave that stuff behind, so they don't have to be thinking about, oh, I don't know what I'm going to have for lunch. I don't know if there's any food at home. I don't know if someone's going to be mean or angry to me when I get home. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. You can't learn if you're worried about those things. And so it's very important that we make sure that all kids have those things so that they can grow up and learn and be functioning adults. Okay, chapter 4.